Alright, here we are. The old Dakota is pretty well, the engine swap's pretty well done. I got a lot of spaghetti to unmess. I did just take it down the road and back, about 7 or 8 miles. Did pretty good. You know, I could have filmed all this hooking up the power steering belt and hooking up the alternator, and I built that little plate there for the throttle throttle linkage, but I don't know that anybody necessarily would learn anything or want to see it. So, and I have limited time, so trying to get something done. I put the glow plugs on that solenoid right there. You look on this side, all 5 of the glow plug wires are soldered together and put in that big lug and bolted to one side of the solenoid. Hot battery voltage to the other side. And then you just energize the solenoid with a starter button that's inside the truck, and you hold it down as long as you want. Had one leak. It was right there where I had to flare that line for the power steering. Put a 3/8 fuel line nut on it to a quarter pipe thread, and believe it or not, that brass quarter pipe thread threaded right into the pressure hose off of the power steering pump on the Mercedes, which is, get my phone to go down, that one right there. Okay, so that's just bolted them two together. Had to make an adapter here for this one to go from the 1/2 inch down to 3/8, and there it goes down through there. So I'm going to give you a list of things I used on this if you decide to do this swap. First of all, I talked about this offset before. The Dodge engine was actually offset over much further than this truck is, and this engine is. If I had to do over, I would move this engine over probably 2 more inches and make a lot more room. This is pretty busy over here. That fuel or that oil filter back there, I'm probably going to have at least take a heater hose loose to get it out. It'll come out without any major, disassembly, but at the same time, it's kind of aggravating. So, I guess first thing, tell you what we modified. Had to cut this out. You can see right here, chop this out. These things swing out this direction somewhat, just a little, probably about to here. So we cut out about 1 1/8 of that. These holes were already in this for these top radiator bolts, and this is a radiator out of a 1989 Dodge Dakota V6 automatic. Transmission lines are hooked up just down there. The bottom radiator hose is Mercedes. Had to put a 2-inch extension on it to keep it out of the fan. Could not run a fan shroud because the engine is higher probably than it should be. If I did another one of these, I would set the motor down probably 3/4 of an inch, and I'd set it over this way 2 more inches. So the drive shafts work perfect. I built them here. I had it up to about 65 miles an hour, and it's just as smooth as that Ford right there, or any other vehicle. I had to adapt the oil cooler lines down to 3/8 and put them on like a transmission cooler, which should be fine. Being as most engines don't even have an oil cooler, but I don't see that as being an issue. I found, let me show you in case you do this, somebody decides to want to do this swap. Let's see, that is the harness for the injectors. Here it is. This is the wire that went to the transmission. If you look at this plug, it's the, make sure I'm telling you right, that wire right there. Okay, second row down, first wire on the right. You cut that wire and ground it. It'll make your solenoid wire power up. So whenever you turn the key, your solenoid wire will it'll energize. Only danger is it will start in any gear. So I'm not telling you should do that. I'm not actually telling you not to. But, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. Okay, to get the fuel pump to run, I pulled the fuel pump relay, made a jumper wire, went from switch voltage, which is would be the one closest to the firewall, and jumped it over to the one next to it. That makes your fuel pump run as soon as the switch comes on. Okay, all we did was cut the braided fuel line down there where it was steel, put a piece of hose on it, run it up here, and did away with the mechanical fuel pump, you know, hand pump, you run out of fuel and all that business. Just put an electric fuel pump on it. A lot of people will probably frown on that, but I did that to my gray car, and I'm here to tell you that thing started better. It starts better than it ever did. So I kind of picked that trick up a long time ago on the old 7.3 IDIs on some of my wreckers in cold weather. If you can turn that thing on and let the fuel pump back fuel up against the back of the injection pump while the glow plugs are getting hot, it does make a difference in the way it starts. I don't give a care what anybody says. I've done enough of them. I'm telling you that's a fact. Now, so we got a radiator out of an 89 Dakota. You could use just about any radiator, but it didn't fit. You know, it's two little studs down here. They're in rubber. They fit right in. There's already holes there. So the vacuum manifold right there is out of that same 89 Dakota. I think it's 89, might be an 88 Dakota, I don't know, 80 something, old Dakota. So catch can for the coolant is off that old Dakota. The drive shaft, the very front, I used the torque biscuit off the Mercedes and the front part of the Mercedes drive shaft and welded it into a Ford 1-ton drive shaft, and used the carrier bearing and slip yoke for the Ford, and then the front of the rear drive shaft is also obviously Ford, and then the very back of it is Dodge Dakota, obviously. So that's how I got the flex joint. Now I unbolted the shifter linkage bracket that bolts to the transmission on these Dakotas, and left it attached to the cable, and made a little cable bracket and welded that bracket to the bracket that was on the Mercedes. Now, I'd be lying to you if I told you it worked perfect. I thought it did. But after taking for a ride and come back, it won't go all the way into park. It'll, if you're rolling slightly, or you put it in park and let off the brakes and it starts to roll, it'll click, 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 but it won't engage park. So I've got to do an adjustment there. And I don't want that. I definitely want to get into park. The thing is slow. You know, I knew that going in. I mean, it'll run 65, maybe 70 on mile an hour. I don't know. But I have not messed with anything yet as far as trying to get the fuel to turn up. I've got the auto valve clear off of it, and it's still not even smoking black. So not sure what's going on there. I'm going to change the fuel filter and see what happens. And I might mount an electric fan. I've got a big electric fan off the Dakota. I think I can get right in here. That'll probably help it cool. Let's see. Fuel filter, all that's just generic stuff. I took the evaporator return line and used that with a piece of this blue plastic to make my fuel return line. Works just fine. Let's see. I don't think there's any other real off-the-wall trick stuff. You know, it's a one-wire GM alternator. And I had to add, let's see here where I welded this piece with the slot in it. I had to add a little to it. But it bolts right on. The bottom part of it fits like it's made for it. The bottom bolt goes right through it. Getting ready to rig up some kind of air filter. And it's got open exhaust right now, and it's surprisingly quiet. So and it sounds like it's making boost. I come up the hill here and I let off of it. It's whoosh, you know, it's not like it's boosting. I mean, it runs okay. It's just not, my silver car over there is a horse compared to this thing. But the engine mounts seem to be working pretty good. It got a little vibration at idle, which these things shake violently at idle if you got a pretty slow idle on them. This cross brace, okay, this looks like it's probably factory, but it's not. It's not. That's supposed to be one piece comes up here, bolts on, and back down. I cut it in half and put these bolts here and here and there because when I chopped this section out, I no longer had a place to attach it. And you definitely need something there. That thing's too flimsy, especially after you chop it, to be slamming the hood on it. So, got that. The oil cooler, you know, you can see how it's mounted, just simple. I don't know what else to tell you. If anybody wants to do this swap, I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but it's not that big a deal. I made the, you know, that bracket there is nothing fancy. Just actually this piece here was bolted there from the factory. It came over here and this little stud stuck straight up. I used that and just cut a notch in it, slid my factory cable in, and then zip tied it to retain it, which it doesn't, I mean, you needed something to keep it from popping out, but as far as it slides right in like it's supposed to. And I just took a little piece and this here, I welded this to the end of one of these little crank rods, and the biggest concerns right now is getting more vacuum to the power brakes and figuring out how to get it to shut off. I'm not too fond of having to shut off. I hate to put a pull cable on it, but you know, we'll do what we got to do. But anyway, like I said, I drove it probably 7 or 8 miles just now, and it did fine. I mean, it hummed right along, and the little truck just runs and drives really nice. I mean, it's these Dakotas. If you ever had a S10 or a Ranger and then went and drove a Dakota, you know what I'm talking about. These things, especially these newer ones with the big wheels and tires on them, they handle and drive really nice. But I don't know, it starts right up and runs. So gotta hook up a windshield washer pump, as it was the old Dakota, the shroud and the radiator and all that. Well, I'll show you. Is all made into one piece, and the tank for the reach it. Damn thing. Let me show you. Top shroud. This is your washer tank. That's the washer tank and the coolant recovery tank all in one. So I don't think it'll work now the way the radiator's bolted in it, but I never did really try to test fit it. Maybe I will. But there's the back half of the what's left of the Mercedes drive shaft. Nothing real trick. I mean, there's no big fancy parts put on this thing. Nothing that you can't build or